Welcome to Education Matters, presented by the Public School Forum of North Carolina. I'm your host for the week, Shantae Russell. In this special edition episode, we'll be taking a look at the Public School Forum's annual Eggs and Issues event, which was held on April 7th in Raleigh this year. This year's program featured a panel of policymakers from the North Carolina General Assembly discussing revenue and school funding, a critical conversation considering that North Carolina is now the only state in the nation without a current budget. Thank you for tuning in, and hopefully you'll learn something new and share what you learned within your community.
As we get ready for this panel, and we'll call it something different than revenue, spending, and policy priorities, let's just call this the Venmo panel. Because like our previous presenters, I don't think anybody in this room minds how you get the money. Cash, check, Venmo, whatever it is. We know that the financial ties back to how we do what we do in this state are important. The North Carolina General Assembly has a job to do in allocating those funds. We all know in this space, you need champions of the work to be able to advance these initiatives forward. And we are proudly going to hear today from 4 folks that are going to be very involved in that conversation as the short/long/short session begins here in the very near future. But also it's important too to put some faces with this work, because these are people trying to do the work too. And we are thankful for their willingness to come here this morning and talk about these issues, but also the willingness of all of our legislators to answer the phone when we call. And have these conversations turn into, hopefully, policy that will make everything work. I'll be calling on specific legislators for these questions, but all of you, feel free to chime in if you've got something to share here, just to keep us moving along. Representative Biggs, we're going to go back to something that you mentioned a moment ago in your introduction. You've got no shortage of priorities as you enter the short session with the budget still looming. What are some of those things that you feel are the tough decisions, the trade-offs that you're going to have to consider as you get into this session?
Well, when we're going into the budget negotiations, actually, you guys will be really happy to hear. I can tell you from the House side, teacher pay is one of our biggest priorities. That's one of the biggest priorities in caucus. That's one of our biggest priorities. And we want a meaningful raise, not a 1 or 2%. We want a meaningful raise. And I will tell you, I am a chair of appropriations. I'm not the final say, but we want to make sure that we're paying you guys and making sure we're getting the best and the brightest, making it where you can. I'm a realtor. That's my day job. We're part-time legislators, but sometimes we're full-time, I guess. I think we're going to be full-time, but coming up here soon. But, I want to make sure that you guys, as a realtor, teachers can buy houses, do things, raise families, and that's a big priority we have. And those things, as far as trade-offs, really, when we're looking at things, education to me is not something that you can trade off. It's not something we can negotiate with. It's something we got to have. You see the opportunities. We've heard the stories today and the opportunities that people have because of education and because that people believed in them. So that's one of the things. We try to be real stickler on the education, and teacher pay is one of my biggest priorities, if not my biggest priority.
Leader Batch, I'll come to you with this same question, but also the time constraints of the available time that you have, also a consideration. How will you work in terms of the Senate Democratic Caucus, making sure that everything education-wise is done from an equitable standpoint, and you've got the voice to be able to bring the minorities' thoughts and issues to the table?
Yeah, so I would say that, like Representative Biggs, our Senate caucus cares very deeply about teacher pay as well. And that's why many of us actually voted for the House budget, because the House budget did a lot more than what the Senate budget did. And you saw at least the quick slide earlier. The reality of the situation is we, in the minority, both the Senate and in the House, Democrats, we have a voice, and we will use that voice. I am one of a few votes that we obviously have in the building, but what I can also tell you is that the Senate Republicans have not come, in my opinion, to the table in a genuine way to go ahead and try and address these needs. I hope now that primaries are over that we are actually able to move forward with regards to a budget. Regarding time constraints, it's short session, but you know what? We're still in a long session. We can just stay there as long as we need to in order to deliver a budget, but also the priorities for education here in North Carolina. And so I would love to just go back to my actual day job that pays my bills. But the reality is that we were all elected to do this one job. As Representative Biggs said, we all want teachers to have one job. Like, we chose 2 jobs because we decided to run for office, but we didn't have to do that. I can make enough money on my one job. But I represent teachers in my law offices that have 2 or 3 jobs because they are not able to work the one job that they went to school for. And so when we're talking about priorities, we should care about the teachers that are in our classrooms every single day, educating our children and educating our future that's going to deliver the return on investment into our state for both being number 1 in corporations, but also in all of the areas that we need right now for all of the jobs that are coming in the future. So with regards to at least our position, we will be loud. We will be very vocal. All of you, if those of you know me, that like I always say that you're going to catch this mouth because I can't throw these hands. So we're going to continue to be in a situation where we will be loud and we will talk about the things that are important. And we hope that at least 6 of our Senate colleagues will join us. I would love all 30 of my Senate Republican colleagues to join us in trying to pass a budget and work with the House on a budget that we can deliver for everyone. But if not, then they'll just continue to catch this mouth.
Leader Batch, as you understand as well as everybody in this room understands, property tax is part of the funding equation. What do you feel like the legislature's best move is to ensure that districts have what they need given all of these revenue sources?
So I think they need to stay out of local property tax business. I mean, there has been an increased pattern of the legislature trampling on other, whether it's municipalities, whether it's the executive branch, heck, the judicial branch, as we see. That opinion on Leandro, it's amazing that the majority walked away, and clearly logic and they were not walking together. If you read that opinion, I am a lawyer, so I understood it differently and read it. But at the end of the day, ultimately what they said is, it's the legislature's job. It's not our job to deal with policy. Okay, well, then it's the legislature's job. If the legislature was told by the Supreme Court to do their job, then that's exactly what we need to do, which means to go ahead and ensure that we are providing a sound basic education that is constitutionally founded in our state statute, in our state constitution for every single child, which also means that we actually have to pay for it. Again, we can't just decide to give more responsibilities to our school systems and then say, figure it out, you don't need more money.
After the break, we'll hear more from the Policymaker panel at Eggs and Issues 2026. Welcome back. Let's hop right back into our revenue and school funding panel at Eggs and Issues 2026.
Representative Rhyne and Hawkins, I'll give this next question to you all. And Representative Rhyne, I'll start with you. You said something a moment ago in talking about how in your home district you were very intentional about how funding was allocated and there was transparency to that process. When you look at the Opportunity Scholarship Voucher Program as it expands, we saw a graph just a little while ago about where that spending will continue to go. How do you as a legislator ensure that there is transparency and accountability for how these funds are being utilized, especially as some of the public schools and districts are dealing with funding cuts on their end?
Yeah, thank you for the question. First, I'll say, let me squash the rumor that there is zero accountability in opportunity scholarships, because there is a whole statute on that you can look at where there is testing and there is reporting requirements for schools that take students that have opportunity scholarships. But I do think it's important to continue to have that discussion and to look at what that accountability looks like. I think those discussions are happening. I've heard just coming into the General Assembly, I know I've already heard colleagues having that discussion of kind of what does that look like. But overall, I'll say from an opportunity scholarship standpoint, it's the one really bipartisan. If you look at any polling out there, Republicans and Democrats, more than 60% support the opportunity scholarship program. And so it really is a bipartisan effort to make sure that our kids are getting the education that in an environment that they feel like they will thrive in. When I look at the state budget and this big pot of money that we have, I think when you look at it as a whole, instead of just this is education funding, this is healthcare funding, and so on and so forth, when you look at that pot as a whole, you're really not looking at when opportunity scholarships are saying we're taking from here and moving it here. I think we're saying this money in the state is being invested in a child's education. And I think that's a very, very important to call out and to remember, is that any money invested in a child's education is extremely important. But I'll say there are other areas that I serve in. Obviously, as a pharmacist, I serve in healthcare. And I think there are ways in our budget and things that we need to look at. We all want to look, it feels like public school always want to look at opportunity scholarships, but there are other areas in our budget that we've got to look at from a healthcare standpoint, from fraud, waste, and abuse, and some things that we are really diving into where money is potentially being wasted, or we could use it more efficiently, that will continue to help fund education. So I'm excited about the opportunities that are there. I'm excited about the bipartisan effort that we have in this.
Representative Hawkins, how do you view the balance between supporting families and also making sure that there's accountability for this program?
I think that, public dollars belong with public schools, right? And because as I say on my floor speeches, I do a lot of things that, I buy things privately, and the state does not subsidize my car. It does not subsidize a lot of the things that we do, and I see it the same way. If you want to move towards a private education, you should want to pay for it. But I think when we're looking at the long term, I think they're looking at about $7 billion spent by 2032 or something along those lines. And I remember when this started, I think, Sydney, you were in the House, and I'm not sure if Representative Biggs had gotten there yet. But it was we were spending about $25 million in opportunity scholarships, and it was based on, like people saying, hey, I want it. And I said, well, why is that? Why just continue that trend? Let people ask for it. And the next thing you know, last session, that next session, we put it on steroids, $50 million a year, and it was almost to the point of $500 million over a decade. And for what? And, and it just didn't seem like it was the right place for us to go when we were already seeing the challenges that public education was facing. He mentioned, teacher pay, but we're talking about out-of-pocket spending from teachers. Like, look at the stats of where we are in per pupil spending and teacher pay, like 43rd and 50th. Like, that's just not who North Carolina is. And so we sort of live by the golden rule, like keep the main thing the main thing. Like if we have 1.5 million kids in our public school system, then that needs to be the thing that is funded first, and then we can get to what's next. And a few of the things that, for me around the voucher program, and I understand that there are some accountabilities, but one thing before I get to some of that is most of these opportunity scholarships are coming to places like Charlotte, Raleigh, and Durham. They're not going to rural areas. And so, what kind of, we don't, I'm not saying that we don't need additional choice, if we always do in those areas, but we want, the part of it should be making sure that especially students who have less choice in some of those areas have it, and they don't. And the numbers really rule that out. It is really an urban underwriting of education. And that's something that's problematic and should be problematic for everybody. Also the teachers being certified and making sure that, they have a curriculum that can stand the standard course of study across North Carolina. Like, there should be, if you're using public dollars, we have to look at equity in the way that we apply the standards for private education. And, and then lastly for me, I think when you think about this program and accountability and the way you spend it, we have people who make $1 million who can participate in this program. There are no income caps on the voucher program. And that, again, is just not a good use of, if somebody can pay for it, they should be able to pay for it. And for those, and again, in the origins of the program, for people who needed choice, who could not afford it, like, that's just been abandoned. And so I do think that it's a great time, given where we are with our state budget and our forecast, and the state of sort of education in North Carolina and the way it plays a role in workforce development. Like, it is worth opening the can again and seeing if we're doing it the right way. Because I'm like my colleagues, I want to make sure that every dollar is used well, that it's directed towards student outcomes, because that, again, allows North Carolina to become this amazing state and continue to be number one in business, can be number one in workforce development, but be a place where when those companies come, every student can't go to a private school, but we have great public schools that they can send their kids to that can build a long-term sustainable program for us. And so I think all those things have to come into bear, and I'm glad to work with my colleagues to continue to have that discussion.
We have one more big topic to get into before we have our closing thoughts here. And I do want to take a second and thank those few members of the business community that are in the room here today and challenge you all to bring friends next time. We need the business voice in this conversation about how we are seeing our next generation of business leaders come to us. The number of times from a chamber perspective we hear about what is deficient in today's workforce. A lot of it comes right back to this conversation about how we fund and set up our local public schools for success in bringing those people to us in the first place. And it's with that, I think there's also a great parallel line in how we are dealing with the workforce in education moving forward. So Representative Hawkins, I'll ask you this first, and we'll bring this to the entire panel here. You've had involvement in the DRIVE task force, which addresses educator recruitment, diversity, and specific policy priorities that you've championed within that work. What do you see as an opportunity in the short session to drive those points, no pun intended, of course, to drive those points home more about recruitment, retention, and workforce diversity as we make sure that there are enough educators and skilled educators to deliver the education that we're trying to provide?
Well, thank you for that question. In North Carolina, 57% of students are of color, but less than 30% of teachers are of color. It makes a difference in the classroom. Everybody benefits when we have a diverse teacher workforce. But some of the things actually we are working on in the House budget. I want to give Representative Biggs a couple shout. Well, he'll hear this and hear his shout outs. But he mentioned one already. It proposed in the budget, and I think Representative Paré was the one to put this forward originally, was that we increase starting teacher pay at $54,000 a year, which will put us top in the Southeast and 10th nationally. Like that's a way to move forward. The second piece is making sure that we continue to support TA to teachers. Every county that you can imagine has a TA who's been there for 10 or 15 years that we just need to support so they can go and get their bachelor's degree to become a full-time teacher. They will stay in those classrooms. That's something that helps with diversifying the teacher workforce, but it helps the entire workforce, especially in rural areas. Same with Grow Your Own. And one thing that Representative Biggs helped with is expanding the Teaching Fellows program to more schools, especially HBCUs. That we know have a long legacy of making sure that we put qualified teachers, administrators, and others in the classroom and in the decision-making space. And so those are a few things that we've done, and I know that we can get done if we move forward with the House budget. And so I think one thing that I want to make sure that people understand is that what is good for the recruitment, retention, and growth of teachers of color are good for all teachers, right? That is the important part to walk away with. And the benefits, again, play themselves out. And so this is one thing that, once we get through those three items that I mentioned, there are a host of others which we've already talked about. But I do think that this session, we can get through those three because they've already been named in at least the House budget and I think once or twice in the Senate budget.
After the break, we'll hear our panelists wrap up this conversation with their priorities for the coming legislative session.
Batch, I'll let you start us down the line here. Anything that you're going to be advocating for in the short session that falls in line with these priorities?
Yes, I think it's important. We should talk about, obviously, starting pay, but we have educators that have dedicated their entire lives to students that we need to actually respect, honor, and make sure that we increase step funding. It isn't enough to get people in the door. It is a revolving door right now where teachers are leaving, right? So when you get to that step level and then you say, oh, right, you've been here long enough, but we're not going to get paid. Who stays in a job in the private sector to say, I'm not going to get a raise for a decade? Nobody. You'd be a dummy. Now, what I'm telling you as educators is that you care more about our students and about your career because you and many are actually leaving because we are not respecting the educators who have dedicated their entire lives to be able to stay in the classroom and teach. And there are a lot of educators who are choosing to leave or to go into a different field or position and not stay in the classroom, right, but go into administration because they're just trying to figure out how to make ends meet. So if we just figured out a way where we could, I don't know, pay people for master's degrees again, and I don't know, respect them for the fact that they should always get a raise and not have to work on, frankly, all of our educators are now living on 2026 expenses, but on a 2023 salary. That we can very easily equalize this, but it's a decision and a priority that the legislature has to make. And so I really do appreciate us talking about new teachers, but we have to go ahead and ensure that we are not investing so much money into the system at the early age and stage where then we lose teachers a decade later. We want people to stay in the field of education for their entire careers, but I completely understand why people are leaving.
Representative Rhyne, your thoughts on how to continue to advocate for the educator pipeline?
So I'll tell you my top, I would say, 3 priorities kind of moving into short session are really budgetary items. Teacher pay, I think everybody up here has mentioned that, of course. I think the House has been clear where we stand on that. But advanced teaching roles is another one, and expanding that across the state is extremely important. It also helps our teachers. I've seen the effect of that and what that can do in districts as far as outcomes. But then also, you mentioned business leaders coming in. I think it's important in short session to get the Workforce Act of 2026 done, which is really going to help our apprenticeship NC program, our North Carolina careers. It'll provide a digital transcript to make some seamless education pathways and some other things. And so I think that's going to be very important moving forward for children. The other thing is, I'll say, when it comes to coming into short session, this is something I've done, I think, since I entered the General Assembly. I was appointed at the end of 2024. And that is really coming in with a different sort of perspective and a different sort of attitude. And we all want to say, let's take politics out of it. And I think you've heard some people say that here this morning, and take the politics out. Well, then take the politics out, is what I would say. Blame is the parking brake to change. And instead of me coming in and blaming, or you coming in and blaming, we all have to sit here and take ownership. We have to all take ownership for something. We have to take ownership. You have to take ownership for what those outcomes look like for students, for what we're doing in North Carolina. And I'll say, having 2 daughters who went through public education and are absolutely thriving at NC State, you should be proud of what you're doing. And so I think really breaking through some of the noise has been my focus. There's a lot of noise up here. There's a lot of political noise. And breaking through that noise, getting in a room, rolling up our sleeves, and getting something done is what I will stay focused on.
Representative Biggs, your thoughts on the education pipeline?
Well, focus is Randolph County motto, students first in all we do. That's our motto in Randolph County, and when I was on the Board of Education there also, there is so much we're trying to look at right now. We're going to make sure we take care of our CTE programs. That's been mentioned many times up here. Obviously, teacher pay is first priority. If you listen to, and it's all online, if you listen to Speaker of the House, Destin Hall, his first speech was about paying teachers and about when he was on the floor and about what he wanted to do and the impact that teachers had in his life. And just so you know, we're working now. Just because we're not in session, we're working now. I was in the office last week. I'll be in the office this week. We're working now, getting ready for this short, long session. And guys, if we're there December 31st, that's fine. We're going to get it done. And I appreciate you guys having us here today. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for taking the time to learn and think with us about education. That's all for today, and we'll see you next week.